Grazing is more than just permanent pasture. Many farms have acres of corn, soybeans, small grains, and hay crop forages which can supplement permanent pastures. The key to success in grazing-based animal production systems is to match animal numbers, genetics, and the management system with the types and amounts of forage available for grazing at different seasons of the year. Meshing these variables can be challenging. Since feed costs make up about half the costs of producing livestock, optimal forage use during each season can increase economic returns. Optimal forage use means sustaining animal performance and minimizing the use of stored feeds while maintaining forage, soil, and water resources. The amount of stored feeds used is the single largest factor separating high and low profit livestock producers. Early spring brings slow forage growth. Excessive early grazing of summer pastures may adversely affect forage growth for the rest of the summer. So, during early spring, animals shouldn't graze until forages are at least 3 to 4 inches high. This can be a difficult decision, particularly under muddy conditions. Alternatives to placing animals on permanent pastures too early include the use of sacrifice pastures, that is, grass-legume pastures which can be easily renovated. Stockpiled cool or warm-season grass species with or without legumes, or fall-seeded small grains such as rye. In mid to late spring, expect rapid forage growth and excess forage. An ideal grazing system maintains forage in an immature state by frequent animal movement in rotational or strip grazing systems. It also includes some hay harvest and possibly temporary grazing by replacement heifers, stocker steers, or dry dairy cows or ewes. Keeping the forage in an immature vegetative state during this season has several advantages. The forage continues to grow throughout the remainder of the season and reduces the negative effects that maturity has on forage digestibility in late summer. As temperatures increase in early to midsummer, growth slows on cool season forage species, which may decrease supply. During midsummer in normal years, any extra animals placed on pastures for spring grazing should be removed from the pasture. The rate at which animals are rotated in the grazing system should also be slowed to remove the proper amounts of forage. Proper rotation ensures adequate leaf area will remain to allow for timely regrowth. Sometimes a 50% removal rate is recommended, but each type of forage responds differently to grazing. For example, alfalfa responds best to more complete removal with longer rests. On the other side, bird's foot trefoil responds best to more frequent grazing intervals, leaving more forage. Use an instrument like a sward stick to most accurately measure remaining forage. When rotating animals to maintain forages, either increase the time animals are in a paddock, if permanent fences are used, or decrease paddock size, if temporary fences are used. The slower movement of animals between paddocks allows for lengthened rest periods for paddocks. During midsummer, the growth of cool season grass species may be limited. Use species which grow well in midsummer to maintain forage supply during this period. Alfalfa is a valuable midsummer forage because of its nutritive value and midsummer growth. Remove a first cutting of alfalfa hay and use regrowth for later grazing. Warm season grass species may be difficult to establish and manage. However, by using early grazing to prevent maturation, these grasses may complement cool season species. Drought or wet years may be crisis times. To manage this risk, stock pastures at a level 20% below the maximum of that pasture for a normal year. This will give a forage buffer for conditions that are either too wet or dry. During drought years, wean calves and lambs to decrease animal numbers in the pasture and decrease nutrient requirements of lactating beef cows or ewes. For lactating dairy cows, it's essential, and for beef cows, stocker cows, and ewes, it may be necessary to feed supplements such as hay or grain. Use creep feed as a supplement for calves. Maintain a sacrifice pasture for feeding stored feeds to allow other pastures to recover for later grazing or to reduce winter losses. In early to midsummer, maintaining forage in a vegetative state is important. Both the amount and quality of forages decrease less rapidly if grazing is allowed than if the forages are allowed to mature. In late summer to early fall, cool season forages begin to grow more rapidly. The rate of growth and the amount of forage will be related to midsummer management and weather conditions. If forage is kept in a vegetative state with adequate residual leaf for photosynthesis, late summer forage growth will be good. If forage is allowed to mature or graze to ground level, late summer forage growth will be minimal. Frequent animal movement is essential because of rapid forage growth. During fall and winter, there are several types of forages available for grazing on Midwestern farms. One alternative forage is corn crop residues. The amounts of these residues available for grazing are approximately equal to the weight of grain that is harvested. So a field with a yield of 120 bushels of grain per acre will have 3 to 4 tons of corn crop residues. The amount of corn crop residues available during grazing in the fall and winter is dependent on the stocking rate, grazing systems, and weather conditions. Cows can maintain body weight if they have access to as little as a half acre of crop residues per cow per month, but as much as 2 acres per cow per month is needed if weight gain is desired. Because strip grazing decreases grazing selectivity and trampling, the fields should maintain forage quality. However, strip grazing seems to only be effective under dry conditions because weather losses from corn crop residues can be extreme. Organic matter losses due to weathering has been tested at 14% in a dry year and 41% in a wet year over a 140-day test period. In an optimum system, strip grazing may be used to restrict grazing on some corn stock fields in dry years, but these paddocks should be opened if conditions become muddy. The nutritive value of corn crop residues is inversely related to the yield of grain in a field, being highest in years with the lowest grain yields. Because the most valuable nutrients in corn crop residues are lost over time, both the digestibility and protein concentration of corn crop residues decrease through the fall and winter. The wetter the year, the more rapidly nutrient digestibility will decrease. Animals selectively graze the most digestible crop residues, such as the grain, husks, and leaves, before consuming stalks. So the higher the stocking rate, the more rapidly digestible nutrients are lost. In general, supplemental protein is not needed during the first 3 to 4 weeks of grazing corn crop residues. After this time, protein should be added in the form of high-quality hays, grain byproducts, processed animal litters, or any other supplement containing no more than 1/3 of its protein from non-protein nitrogen sources. Animals fed corn crop residues always need supplemental phosphorus, trace mineral salt, and vitamin A. Another alternative forage for fall and winter grazing is stockpiled hay crop forages. This includes the regrowth from hay fields or pasture that's allowed to accumulate from early August to fall or winter. Depending on the length of regrowth, the amounts of available forage from cool season species that are available will be 1 to 1.5 tons of dry matter per acre. The digestibility of stockpiled hay forage can vary from 64% to 52%, depending on how long the forage was stored. Both quality and yield of forage over winter will be affected by the stocking rate, the grazing system, and the weather. Strip grazing is necessary to control grazing selection and forage utilization. Precipitation, especially in early fall, will leach nutrients. Losses from ungrazed tall fescue and alfalfa pastures can vary from as little as 6% to as high as 33%, depending on how wet the fall is. By comparison, large hay bales might experience as great as or even greater losses. Cattle will graze stockpiled forages through several inches of snow, so in southern Iowa, hay feeding may be delayed until late January. However, a covering of ice might abruptly end grazing of the stockpiled forages. As with corn crop residues, move cattle to a dry lot or sacrificial pastures in early March to prevent damage to valuable forage plants and prevent soil compaction. During every season, it's important to consider animals' nutrient and life cycle needs in relation to available forages. The energy requirements of beef cows are affected by their mature size, milk production potential, body condition, growth, pregnancy, and environmental temperature. Energy requirements of large breeds like Simmental and Charolais are approximately 20% higher than British breeds. Increased energy is needed during the last trimester of gestation and when it's cold. It takes more energy to replace body condition in a thin cow than to maintain body condition in a cow in moderate condition. A body condition score of 5 on a 9-point scale at the beginning of the breeding season is needed for rebreeding. The goal, then, of a winter system should be to have the cows come into the grazing season at a condition score of 5. This means the nutrient requirements of large, high milk-producing breeds may be too high to be met in a year-round grazing system. As a result, when wintering costs for a cow herd are high, moderate-sized animals are the most profitable. Timing of calving should also be coordinated with forage supply. There are advantages and disadvantages to calving in each season. April calving will match the cow's maximum energy requirements with maximum forage availability in late spring. April calving will also match the cow's minimum energy requirements with the time that crop residues or stockpiled hay crop forages are most available. However, there will be limited forage availability for grazing in late winter and early spring, as energy requirements increase in late pregnancy. There's often mud to contend with in April, and it's difficult to finish cattle for the seasonably high price. To minimize problems with calving in April, improve storage and feeding methods to improve quality and reduce losses from stored forages. Also, use sacrifice stockpiled pastures of either cool or warm season grasses, which may be regularly renovated. In contrast, calving in February provides larger calves at weaning, eliminates the mud problem of April calving, and fed cattle are sold at the market high. But the maximum energy requirements occur at the time of minimum forage availability for grazing. Therefore, this system results in excessive production costs. Calving in May shifts the energy requirements so they'll be lowest when forage availability is the lowest. This provides the opportunity to winter cows on a minimum of stored forage. On the other side, the maximum energy requirements of cows occur after peak summer forage availability. The breeding season occurs when forage may be limited in drought years, and fed cattle are sold at lower summer prices. The nutrient requirements of dairy cattle are affected by cow size, production level, growth, and pregnancy. The energy requirements to maintain a 1,400-pound cow will be 30% greater than that to maintain a 1,000-pound cow. At peak lactation, the energy requirements of a high-producing cow will be more than 20% greater than that of a cow with a moderate production level. Therefore, in dairy production systems, cow type and management systems must match land use base. On farms with highly erodible soil, consider grazing with seasonal dairying. If supplemental feeds are expensive, it makes sense to use a smaller cow with a moderate milking ability. On farms with land that can be safely cropped year-round, dairying for high milk production with maximum grazing from April to December is likely to be more profitable. Because of the high nutrient requirements of dairy cattle, management of the pasture forage for high nutritive value is essential. Management techniques include controlling forage quality in the late spring through hay removal, cleanup grazing with dry cows or heifers, and seed head clipping. Synchronized timing of freshening with forage growth is important. Because peak lactation occurs 6 to 8 weeks after freshening, calving in early April places peak lactation at the time of peak forage growth. After peak lactation, milk production and forage production both decrease. However, in the fall, stockpiled hay crop forages can provide high-quality forage at the end of lactation when cattle need to replace body fat reserves. The dry period occurs in January and February, when stored feeds must be used regardless of the system. Consequently, lower quantities and qualities of stored feeds may be fed. In spite of good management, greater variability in forage supply and quality is likely to occur in a grazing system than in a confinement system. The high water content in lush forage and the high fiber content in mature forage limit feed intake. The high rate of passage of lush forage may limit forage digestibility. As a result of these factors, some supplementation with stored feeds is likely to be necessary. Although little research information is available, it's recommended to feed grain at the rate of 1 pound for every 4 pounds of milk produced. Add a protein source with a low ruminal degradability like corn gluten meal or meat meal to the grain mixture. Do not add supplemental fat to the grain mix fed to grazing cows. Feed small amounts of dry hay to reduce the rate at which lush forage passes through the animal. Stocker cattle provide a method of forage utilization and enterprise diversification with a lower investment than purchasing a cow herd. Iowa State University studies show stocker cattle that summer graze require 15 to 45% less grain to finish than cattle move directly into a feedlot in the spring. The downside is risk in price changes, weather, and animal illness. Therefore, the producer's goals are to minimize feed costs, maximize gains on pasture, and minimize animal loss. With a stocker steer production system, the plan should match the animal's growth with forage availability. In fall and winter, graze corn crop residues and/or stockpiled hay crop forages to minimize feed costs. Because of the risk of inclement weather, a supply of stored forage like hay or harvested crop residues is necessary. Graze stocker cattle alone or lead graze stockers before cows. The length of the grazing period will be determined by animal performance. If animals gain less than 2 pounds a day, they should be moved to the feedlot for finishing. Because it takes 10 pounds of grain for each 1 pound of extra weight gain, grain supplementation for animals on pasture generally is not recommended. However, supplementation with small amounts of a protein escaping ruminal degradation, like corn gluten meal and blood meal, has been shown to increase weight gains. The profitability will depend on the costs of the supplement relative to the gain. To optimize profitability in sheep production, it's important to synchronize ewe nutrient requirements with the availability of forage for grazing. Ewes' energy needs are affected by size, pregnancy, and milk production. Energy requirements of large breeds like Suffolks will be 25% or more higher than smaller breeds. During the last 4 to 6 weeks of gestation, the requirements of a ewe that's pregnant with twins will be twice as high as a non-pregnant ewe. Also, because milk production will peak 4 weeks after lambing and will be 40% higher in a ewe nursing twins than in a ewe producing a single lamb, energy requirements will continue to follow this trend. Flushing, or providing extra nutrients to young or poorly conditioned ewes before and during the breeding season, will increase the number of lambs they produce. Traditional February lambing, unfortunately, is not in sync with forage availability. Peak lactation and peak nutrient requirements occur in March, when forage availability is low. In addition, the period when flushing should be practiced occurs in late summer, when forage availability is, again, low. In contrast, the ewe's minimum nutrient needs will occur in early summer, the period when forage availability and quality are highest. With late April or early May lambing on pasture, the ewe's peak requirements occur when forage availability is the highest. Then her dry period and early gestation occur during periods when forage availability is low. In this system, flushing occurs in October and November, when there is availability of high-quality stockpiled hay crop forages and crop residues. Pasture lambing can pose some specific problems. Predators have been a major limitation to lambing on pasture in the past, but new electric predator fencing has minimized this problem. Internal parasites present problems in the pasture, but a well-managed rotational grazing system and proper use of anthemetics should decrease this problem also. It's essential for each producer to look at his or her operation when planning and adapting an intensive controlled grazing system. The key to optimum profits is to match the numbers, genetics, and management of animals with the forages available for grazing in every season of the year.